In a world where certain companies fail and others succeed, I've burned with the question, why? My journey started 40 years ago in the state of Michigan. Those of us from Michigan use our hand because Michigan looks like a hand if you look at the United States. I was going to college just outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan. We wore our hair a little bit longer then. We actually had a little more hair then. Let me tell you a little bit about the culture of that time and place. It's where the anti-Vietnam War movement started. It was not unusual to see a naked co-ed running across the campus or even down the hallway of your classroom. It was what the media called the streaking epidemic. It was only a $5 fine if you were caught smoking marijuana. Now, I come from a working class family, and I had to pay my way through college flipping hamburgers. You know how sometimes in your life something happens that changes your future forever? Well, I asked the girl out on a date, and she said no. I'm curious, why? Because you smell like a fried hamburger. The next day I saw an ad for the Vulcan Fire Protection Company, and I got the job. It was pretty basic. We would go into people's homes and we would talk to them about the dangers of fire. We would get the husband and the wife sitting at the kitchen table. We would get the children watching TV in the other room. I had a little cardboard house that I would set up on the table. It had little windows in it. I would put a candle inside the house and light the candle, and you could see the flames flickering through the window. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. A fire starts in your home. One of 1,400 different ways that a fire can start in your home. You have 4 minutes to get your family out of that fire alive. What's going to wake you up? Then I would take the gold, round Vulcan fire protection system and set it on top of the house. A few seconds later, it would ring at 110 decibels and everybody would jump. What's going to wake you up is the Vulcan fire protection system. Now, I did very well. In fact, by May of 1974, I was one of the top 10 Vulcan fire protectors in the entire world. One day, my boss came up to me and said, "How would you like to own your very own company?" Wow, I thought. I called my stepfather, and he says, "Well, what about college? I guess I'd drop out." Drop out? That would be stupid. If you drop out now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Don't do it. So what do you think I did? I dropped out of college and started the Taylor Fire Protection Company in Holland, Michigan. Now, culturally, Holland was very different than Ann Arbor, Michigan. If you Google Holland, Michigan, you'll see that it's known as the city of churches for the 1,500 churches for 15,000 residents that lived there. Everything was closed on Sunday. You couldn't drink a glass of wine on Sunday. You couldn't go to the movie theater on Sunday. You couldn't get the KFC Sunday special. But I opened up my office, hired some salespeople, trained them. They went on calls, but they didn't make sales. This I recognized as a problem. So as a good manager, I went out on some calls to find out what was going on. They were doing everything the way they were trained, 1,400 different ways, 4 minutes to get out of the fire alive. The only thing that's going to save you is the Vulcan fire protection system. But the husband would look at the salesperson right in the eye and he would say, "We don't need your Vulcan fire protection system. God will protect us from fire." Now, this was an objection I never heard in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I went to my mentor for advice. He gave me a good comeback. On the next call, sure enough, the husband says, "God will protect us from fire." And I said, maybe, maybe God sent me here today to tell you about the Vulcan fire protection system. My worst nightmare came true. I went out of business, closed down the office, laid off the salespeople. A failure. My stepfather was wrong about one thing. I didn't regret it for the rest of my life, because that failure sparked in my belly a fire to find out the answer to that question, why? Why do certain companies fail and others succeed? And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So the problem is when I talk to people about culture, especially business people, I typically hear culture, that touchy-feely stuff. We don't want to talk about culture. Tell us how to improve our bottom line. There's a misconception about what culture is. People think that a good culture is having pizza on Fridays and allowing your employees to wear jeans to work. That's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. What I'm here to talk to you is about a global problem. It's a problem that the Gallup organization surveyed over 25 million people. And across the world, this is a problem. Now, these are the statistics for France. Here in this country, 6 out of 10 employees are doing just the minimum to get by. And almost 3 out of 10 are actively unhappy. Does that surprise you? It surprised me. The impact this has on the workforce is if you're working for a bad boss, it doubles the risk of having a heart attack. Anyone here work for a bad boss ever? It increases the likelihood that your children are going to be juvenile delinquents. But here's the one that I thought would get this audience's attention. Less sex in the marriage. Now, we can't have that, can we? Now, for you hardcore CEOs, the bottom line differential is 50%. 50% effect on the bottom line. Why? It's culture. And 8 out of 10 companies do not design their culture. So what I'm here to tell you today is what you can do to design your culture and have one of those companies that succeeds rather than fails. I'm going to give you a map. The map is so that you can locate where your tribe is. Now, what's a tribe? Just like fish school, birds flock, we as human beings tribe. We are tribal. We are mammals that hang out with other people. And what our research found is that these tribes affect the strategies of your organization. So the first thing that you need to do is identify what stage of development your tribe is at. Or some of you have multiple tribes, and then come up with the appropriate leadership strategy to move them to the next level of development. Now, this is based on research. It was a 12-year study, 24,000 people, and was published as the book Tribal Leadership. But I'm going to tell you my story today, because I want you to walk away from today knowing that this isn't a theoretical concept, but something that's real world, something that I've lived. But first, the big picture. How do we as human beings create reality? So there's a story about the 3 Musketeers. They had a mission and they had to travel across the country. They set up their tent in the middle of the forest and they went to sleep. It's the middle of the night. Athos wakes them up and says, wake up, what do you see? And they look up and they say, millions of stars. What does that tell you? Well, from an astronomical perspective, it tells me there's galaxies and planets in the universe. From an astrological perspective, I can see that Saturn is setting in Leo, and according to yesterday's paper, if you're in Aries, you're going to have a meaningful relationship with a Taurus. Now, time-wise, I'd say that it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. Meteorologically, I'd say that we're going to have a clear, sunny day tomorrow. Theologically, I'd say that the universe is vast and we're small and insignificant as human beings. What does it tell you? It tells me that somebody stole our tent. Now, the reason why I like that joke is it perfectly illustrates what we found out in our research. It's language that creates reality. You see, as human beings, we look up at the sky, we have the same eyes, but depending on the linguistic distinctions that you have, an astrologer sees something different than an astronomer, than a meteorologist. And why this is relevant is that my colleague Dave Logan, who wrote this book, the way that he did the research is he interviewed these 24,000 people over 12 years, and he listened to the way that they spoke, their language. And he noticed that they fell into 5 different buckets or stages that he creatively named stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, at these different stages, we see that people see a different reality. And what I want you to do is to think about the tribes in your organization and figure out what stage of development are they. So we're going to create this cultural map together. I'm going to tell you the language or the theme of the language, the percentage of the study, and the way that they're related to other people, the structure of relationships, so that you can identify what stage they're at. Stage 1. At the age of 21, I married my first wife. A few years after the fire, I came home from work, and she said, "Honey, we need to talk." We sat down at the kitchen table. There was no aroma of a dinner cooking. "I want a divorce." "What? Aren't we supposed to get marriage counseling or something?" "No, I've made up my mind. I want a divorce." "Well, when?" "Now. I want you out of the house now." I was so numb that I don't even remember packing up my clothes. I drove to my brother's house and proceeded to get drunk. You see, when I was 6 years old, my father left my mother, and I made a promise to myself that I would never end up in divorce. And here it was happening to me. My world fell apart. I quit my job, I drove to California, and I lived homeless, jobless, and drunk for the next 6 months. Life sucked. That's the language of stage 1. And when life sucks, we're angry. We're angry at the world. At this stage, which was only 2% of what we found in our research, what happens in the business world is that we take it out through sabotage, theft, extortion, or we take it out on ourselves through alcoholism and drug abuse. At this stage, you don't want people in your organization. You don't have the resources to take care of it. So my recommendation is to let them go. Now, what do? We ostracize ourselves from everyone else. We don't want any help. We are completely alienated, like the homeless person on the park bench. Stage 2. My new boss welcomed me into his massive office, which was bigger than my apartment. He was a massive man weighing over 300 pounds. Told me to sit down. "Well, me and the boys here, we really believe that we need to get to know one another. that it's important that we create good morale, that we have a good culture here. And the way that we do that is we go to all of the games together. You like sports? Yeah, I lied. Well, me and the boys, we go to all of the Tigers games and the football games and the basketball games. We bring the top salespeople and some of our customers with us, makes them feel special, you know. So the way that we finance this is I'm going to give you an expense account of $500 a week. I'll approve it, you cash the check, and then you give back $250 a week to me, and I'll use that for our recreation fund. All of us do that here. That's the way things are done. I felt a knot in my stomach. He says, "Do you understand? How do I get the receipts?" Well, it's simple. Every time you go to a restaurant, you ask for an extra receipt, and you fill it out. You make your expense report come to $500. You cash the check, and you give back $250. I left. A week later, I turned in my first expense report. A few seconds later, the intercom buzzed on my desk, his secretary announcing that he wanted to see me now. The sweat was rolling down my body as I walked across the office. He had my expense report in his hand, and he was waving, and he told me to sit down. "What's this?" he yelled at me. "How come it's not $500 like we talked about? Wasn't I clear?" I looked down and I said, "I didn't feel comfortable." "You didn't feel comfortable? What kind of goody two-shoes are you?" And he picked up a gray swing-line stapler and he threw it across the room, creating a large noise and a hole in the sterile dry wall. "Get out of here," he said. "I don't even want to see your face." And I left that office. My life sucked. Stage 2, the language is some theme of my life sucks. 25% of the workforce is at this stage, according to our research. The language of my life sucks is the language of BMWs, bitches, moans, and whines. It's the language of complaint. We're resigned, and all we can do is complain about it, is gossip about it. And the structure of the relationship is separate, because we're looking around us and seeing that everybody else's life works. All the other managers were having fun and going to games, and I wasn't. It was like when I went to junior high school and we had a prom, you know, where the boys dress up in tuxedos and the girls wear party dresses. You go to the high school prom and you see the boys are on one side of the room and the girls are all huddled on the other side of the room, and in the center there's just a few couples dancing. Who's dancing? The popular kids, the head of the cheerleading squad, the captain of the football team. And here we are on the sidelines. Well, if only I was on the football team, maybe I could have a girlfriend. If only I didn't have such acne, maybe I could be dancing. This is the language of stage 2. Stage 3. I'm great and you suck. Generally, the "you suck" is in parentheses. It was my first trip out of the country, well, to Hawaii, which was foreign to me. It was for the Sales Leadership Club, for the top 5% of all the salespeople in the world. I was there with my new fiance. We're sitting at the table talking about why all the losers weren't there like we were. You know, I'm the first one in the morning in the office and the last one to leave. If only they would work as hard as I do, they could be winners. I went to college at night, 2 nights a week to get my bachelor's degree. If only they would invest in their education, they could succeed too. And then, to the tune of Rocky music and applause, in our tuxedos, we went on stage and we received the awards acknowledging our greatness. This is stage 3. You can tell people at stage 3 because it's all about me. They're the persons that talk the most in every single meeting that you go to. Well, enough about me. What do you think of me? At stage 3, our biggest complaint, though, is that we don't have enough time. Why don't we have enough time? Because by the time it would take me to explain to you how to do this, I could do it myself, and it would be done right. Now, the structure of the relationship at stage 3 is what we call a hub and spoke structure. You know, I'm the rock star, and this is my supporting cast. I'm the doctor, these are the nurses, we're your medical team. I'm the CEO, and this is my vice president of operations, and my vice president of finance, and my vice president of marketing, and my vice president of technology. Does that look familiar to any of you? This is the structure of corporate America. It's a one-to-one relationship that we have with each of these people. And what our research found is that this dyadic relationship is inherently unstable. Biologists tell us that as human beings, we cannot tell the difference between perception and reality. The only way that I know I'm not crazy is through the feedback of another human being. But here's the catch. If I see black and you see white, who's right? According to Nietzsche, there is no truth. There is only interpretation. It is he who has the power that determines the truth. It's he who has the power that determines who's right, who knows, who's wrong, who doesn't. Stage 4. We're great. Yeah, congratulations last night. And they're not. This is the stage where we see teamwork emerge, collaboration, the agile movement, right? This was 22% of the workforce. Stage 3 was 49% of the workforce. And what we find is when we move from stage 3 to stage 4, we see significant increases in performance, productivity, less stress, and more fun. Now, here's what I found that was particularly interesting about stage 4. The structure of the relationship was not one-to-one. We found that people met in groups of 3. In triads, but not just 3 people talking, 3 people that were responsible for the relationship, and each of them took that responsibility. They managed the relationship according to principles, according to values, and they had a common purpose. This is the hallmark of stage 4, where we go beyond me to we, which takes 3. Now, after I left corporate America, my wife encouraged me to go back into business. I was afraid of failure again, but I couldn't stand the culture of corporate America. Now, I started a company called the Taylor Systems Engineering Corporation. And if you're wondering what stage is somebody that keeps on naming companies after themselves, you would be correct in assuming that they were at stage 3. I was still at stage 3. I was the programmer, I was the salesperson, and I was the bookkeeper. And even when I hired people, I checked and double-checked every line of code, every invoice, every proposal that went out. I never took a day off. I was the first one there in the morning and the last one to leave. I was afraid of failure. I saw this statistic at a workshop. In the United States, we have 28 million businesses that file tax returns. 96% of them never achieve $1 million in revenue. Less than 0.5% or 4% ever get 10 million in revenue, and less than 0.5% ever get 50 million in revenue. And those walls are predictable walls, are obstacles for moving your organization from one level until the next. The wall that was preventing me from going from 10 million to 50 million is a wall that we call the failure of the CEO to delegate. I had an epiphany. I went to my wife and I said, you know that money that we've been saving for our children to go to college? Can I borrow that? I need to hire an executive team. And so I hired a vice president of engineering, a vice president of sales, and a vice president of finance and administration. I never heard of TRIADS, but it was that triad that caused our company to go to the 58th fastest growing company in the state of Michigan and to be profitable every year until we sold it. There's another famous triad, Google. Stage 5. The language of stage 5 is life is great. There's a story about the architect of Notre Dame. He saw 3 people working. He walked up to the first person and said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm laying bricks. He walked up to the second person and said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm building a wall. He walked up to the third person and said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm building a cathedral that will last forever to honor God. At stage 5, what we see is that people have something higher, something that we call a noble cause, something that they want to make a difference in the world. When we interviewed the CEO of Amgen and asked him who his competition was, he didn't say another pharmaceutical company, he said cancer. At stage 5, we see that people move from a life of success to creating a life of significance. It was only 2% of the people that we found in our study. The structure of the relationship is ever-expanding triads. It's all-inclusive. The more people, the better, because we're looking to change the world to a better place. There's somebody that you may recognize. That's Bill Gates. Certainly he was stage 3 during most of his career at Microsoft. But look at today at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with a mission to eliminate malaria in the world. That's a stage 5 noble cause. So here are the 5 stages. Where are the tribes in your organization? And what our research shows is if we can move over that line into stage 4 is where you're going to increase profit and productivity 3 to 5 times. Now I'm going to tell you exactly how you do that. How do you create a culture? I'm going to show you a short 3-minute video. It comes from the days of Candid Camera and Alan Funt. But the secret to changing culture is right here, so pay attention.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the Candid Camera staff, 3 of them at least.
Triad.
And this man has apparently been in groups before. Here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear, and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door. Everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
So to design a culture, we have to get everyone facing the elevator the same way. How do we do that? As human beings, we need a purpose, a reason to do that. That's what we call our noble cause. And then we have certain principles. So if most of your people are facing the rear in the elevator, when you hire somebody new, they're going to see, this is how we do things here. That is what culture is. This is how we do things here. Now, here's a case study of an organization, Laufer Group International. They're a logistics company that take goods that are manufactured in China and carry them into the United States on these containers. The first thing that we do is we measure, where is the organization now? Now, you probably have an organization with tribes like this. You'll see that you have some people at stage 2, some people at stage 3, and some at stage 4, but there'll be a center of gravity. Here, the center of gravity, or the middle, is at stage 3. I'm great, and you suck. So how do we move a company from stage 3 to stage 4? Well, the first thing that we need to do is to discover the core values of that organization. Now, when I say core values, I'm not talking about the typical understanding of core values. It's not fancy words like integrity or excellence. Enron Corporation had those chiseled on their wall. What I'm talking about are principles that are guidelines for making decisions. For example, as a single mother, my mom put me in charge of my 2 younger brothers. She gave me this guiding principle whenever she was gone: act as if your mother is watching. My wife took that up, and now whenever I'm someplace without her, she says, act as if your wife is with you. It's been a good guideline for my behavior. But that's what we're talking about. What are the guidelines for your organization? Which way do we face in the elevator? Then we determined what their noble cause was. When I talked to the CEO, Mark Laufer, he says, noble cause? We're the anti-noble cause. We are blood-sucking vampires living on the backs of American jobs. What could possibly be noble about what we do? That's where we started. As he began to tell me about the logistics industry, he was telling me how sleazy it was, how there were bribes under the table, how if you asked where your container was, you never got a straight answer. In fact, there's a joke in his industry. Do you know how to tell when a logistics professional is lying? When their lips are moving. This was something that he was dead set against, that made him angry. He said that he wanted to create a different kind of a company. I asked him to write his obituary, and he said that he wanted to create a legacy, a company that stood out from all other logistics companies, a company that delivered integrity. And that became their noble cause. Then we took 3 people, a triad, and we put those 3 people in charge of executing that strategy. We gave them 90-day micro-strategies with specific results. But it was one for all and all for one. No individuals coming back to the CEO to complain about what the other two aren't doing. They were all responsible for it. 6 months later, this is what we saw. We saw that the center of gravity moved from stage 3 to stage 4, and we saw significant increases in profit and productivity. So those are the 5 steps for changing your culture, for being in the minority, to have that competitive advantage. I'm going to wrap up with a story about the Vulcan Fire Protection Company in 1973. I was new on the job. I got an appointment in a mobile home park. I was pretty happy because people who live in trailers are more aware of the dangers of fire. I got into the living room, had the kids watching TV, moved into the kitchen with the husband and the wife. We all lit up a cigarette because we all smoked in the 70s. Smoking, by the way, is the #1 cause of fire in homes. I set up my little cardboard house. I asked the gentleman what he did for a living, and he told me he just got laid off from Ford Motor Company. Oh, I'm thinking, chances are he's not going to be able to afford it, but I'm already here. I might as well practice my presentation. I lit the candle. I said, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. A fire just starts in your home from one of 1,400 different ways that a fire can start in your home. You have 4 minutes to get out of that fire alive. What's going to wake you up? I saw tears running down the wife's face. I got to the end when the Vulcan Fire Protection System went off. She said, honey, we've got to get this. He says, we can't afford it. I'm looking at them. We're all smoking a cigarette. And I said, if between the two of you, you could reduce your smoking by just 1 pack of cigarettes a day, you could afford the Vulcan Fire Protection System because that's all it costs. They did it. A few weeks later, they had a fire, and the Vulcan Fire Protection System saved their lives and the lives of their children. She was so happy that she wrote a letter to the president of the company saying that if you hadn't been there that day, they would have certainly perished in that fire. A few months later, I was called on stage and given the Vulcan Lifesaver Club Medal of Honor for being instrumental in the saving of human lives. I was given a badge that said, I save lives for a living, and I knew that I did. That's how I became one of the top 10 Vulcan fire protectors in the world, because I knew that every single call that I made could make the difference between life and death to the family that I spoke to. That's why I defied my stepfather and went into business myself, because I knew that what I did made a difference. Now, I'm not here today to sell you a Vulcan fire protection system. I'm here to sell you on the idea that you, the leaders of your organizations, can design your culture. I've told you how to do it. You have to come up with the principles in your organization that tell people how we do things here, and then come up with your noble cause, because I'm certain that every single one of you makes a difference. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.